Hello, welcome everybody, welcome the panel. We're discussing today a huge topic, which is design and functionality, and whether that has changed in recent times. It's something I've had to discuss throughout my whole career, so this is an ongoing topic, I guess. I'm just going to introduce the panel to everybody, and then I think each will describe what they do, and then we'll have a little conversation. First of all, we have Aagaard Jensen, who is a designer. Then we have Benoit Wolfrom, who is a owner and founder of Functional Art Gallery. And then we have Arthur Hoffner, another designer. And then we have Annelies Thoelen, yes, who's a design curator from Z33 in Belgium. So I think if maybe Annelies, you begin first and tell us a little bit about what you do. Thank you.
Of course, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. They asked me to bring along some photographs, so I did. I'm not sure if someone is... Yes. I brought to you pictures of what we are dealing with at the moment, because Z33 is an art space in Hasselt, and we will open our new building next week. So we are very busy and it's very chaotic, and I thought I'd bring you some pictures of the building. You can rotate them a little. We already had an art space building, which is from 1958, and this is from 2019, so it's a modern fiancé of our first building. And the architect is Francesca Torzo, an Italian architect, and she already won quite some prizes with the building, so we are very happy to be already in the center of attention before we are actually open. Yeah, they will come along on the screen. It was just to give you some impressions of what we are working with. So Z33 is an art center, and we focus on contemporary art, design and architecture. And we don't have a collection, so we always ask designers, architects and artists to make new work and to come and have expositions with in our building and with other artists. So we always try to be on the top of what is happening in artistic research or the topics that are happening inside these three fields. And we are also internationally renowned for doing that. We curated 2 years ago the Istanbul Design Biennale, and we always present in Milan. And so we are working internationally, and we are quite well known inside Belgium for our talent program, which is also the project that we are here with. At the 4th floor, we have our exhibition of Format, which is our talent program for young designers and young architects who just recently graduated from school, and they can have a 1-year trajectory at our art center to develop their research or their practice, and we show them where we can. We help them develop their discourse and their projects. So that is what we are quite well known for, and we also have various exhibitions every year. So I work as a design curator, and I'm the head of the artistic program, so I try to look at the coherence of everything we do, because we do some things in our building. We also do projects in open air, like in public space. And we do a lot of projects with students or with the government, or projects that we are commissioned for to have an artist working on things. And next to that, I teach as well. I teach design, contemporary design. So that's what I do. Sorry that there's no slides, but you should come when you're ready to Hasselt from next week on.
Thank you. Hello, so my name is Arthur. I'm a French designer. I mean, I studied design at school. But first I started by craftsmanship with iron working when I was a teenager. And then I studied design at NC, Les Ateliers in Paris. And while these studies, I worked also with artists. So I work in a triangle between sculpture, craftsmanship, and design. That's and this triangle is really fitting to the last project I made, which are fountains, interior fountains, because it's really an object which has an ambiguous functionality, which is between design and sculpture. It's really technical, but also totally useless in a functional way. Maybe we have some pictures coming, I don't know. No problem. The fountains maybe you saw here in Collectible, are made with Manufacture de Sèvres, which is a porcelain. Okay, so this is the starting point of the project. So I really like to work with the cultural and mythological and historical material about a project. So the first point is the water in nature, in the past civilization, and nowadays in our industrial objects. And I tried to mix all of this. We can in some. So these are the first prototypes I made, which are really constructed with things connected to water at home, like funnels, bowls, sponge, the hose for the garden. And the thing I tried in this object is to hide the technical part, because they work with a little pump to make this cycle of water, and I really tried to hide the technical part to create some object where you just concentrate on the flow of water without thinking about how it works. So, for example, what I like to do is really to think and to use about materials that are connected to water in the collective mind. Like the chrome is really connected to the bathroom, the marble is also connected to bathrooms or to the kitchen. All what evocates sponge or things that could absorb water, for example. So there is a lot of materials connected to it, and this is one of the fountains you saw upstairs. So we worked with Sèvres to create like a fake sponge in ceramic, to create some connection between the colors of the enamel, which is on the porcelain, and the paint and the tube. And so, for example, here the funnel is totally useless. It's just here to make your mind thinks that the water is coming from the top of the object. Of course, it's not. As well as the tube is hollow in the end to make you think it could leak, but maybe we can just look at the next one to see that it's rather a kind of a technical object because you have electricity, water, you have to make everything waterproof. So it's a whole game about this. I think I have too many pictures. Maybe I don't know what time I have to. No? Okay, so we can. These are some other bigger scale ones that were shown in Milano, and every time, like I try to play with very simple links between materials, between shapes, to make you think that it's purely connected with a rope, but of course you have a quite complicated circulation of the liquids. This is a very simple one made about with sandstone. Yeah, it's a bit the same project that is with some variation. We can change. So yeah, so for example, here I use also some things from the really daily life that are not precious at all, but with changing the material and the finish of it. For example, here it's copper things for the water at home with a golden finish, and it allows to totally change the preciousness of it. yeah, so then you can check the project if you want, maybe on internet. But it's really this question of just an animated object, something which creates a sound, an atmosphere, and which is not static. So I think that's it. Thank you.
Cool. Hi everyone, I'm Benoit Wolfrom. I'm the founder of owner of Functional Art Gallery, which is a design gallery based in Berlin, Germany. We opened the gallery almost 2 years ago now, in 2018, as an off project of Paris Project, which is a contemporary art gallery that's focused into emerging artists. And so we started Functional Art Gallery with a very similar project and focus, which is finding emerging designers and then, giving them the opportunity to explore their practice. You see in the back different kind of projects we've done, exhibitions, fairs. Our point of view and our focus is to really try to replace contemporary design into the more global contemporary art conversation, because we believe that it's the same thing and it's part of the same compound. So we're really trying to look at what is design, what is functionality, which is our topic of today, and how that functionality or lack thereof impacts, the conceptual or aesthetic value of an object. That's it.
All right. Hi, everyone. I'm Anna, and I'm one of the artists with Benoit. I don't know if there's going to be some slides, but either way. So I am a designer, but more of a conceptual, funny designer. And I have a very sculptural approach to my practice, which means that somehow the objects that I make also finds its way into like the sculptural field of not art but design, but it has a different kind of approach and also has a different kind of value. Mostly my universes consist or springs from the notions of women, the thoughts that we have on femininity and the collective constructed notions that we bring towards women. So I constantly try to aspire to create universes, but also atmospheres that allows us to experience a more femme universe in order to kind of bring that to the field of contemporary design field, and because I think it has high value and has high importance as well. So in my objects also one of the main factors is actually the usage of makeup that I either integrate into the material or I spray it onto the objects now with airbrush in order to kind of really bring in this femininity, but while it hits the object it kind of also gives a different side of makeup actually, and the bad side, so it's always an ambiguous use of it, I think. Yeah. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you. As we kind of said at the beginning, this is a huge subject and probably not something that we're going to resolve in the next 45 minutes. But it's interesting to hear everybody's opinion on functionality and design. And I mean, for me personally, it's always been an interesting subject, the idea that it's kind of a commonly held belief that all design must have a function that is what makes it design. But what functionality is a fluid concept, and I think it's particularly interesting if you think of functionality as something that can give emotion or give a message. It doesn't necessarily have to be a function in terms of a physical function. And I think that's something that's increasingly explored by younger designers especially. But Arthur, I'm going to pick on you because you said quite early on that you described some of your work as useless, which is which is an interesting thing to do. And I'm interested to know if when you're creating your works, what you see the purpose of them is. Is the purpose of them something that's personal to you? in which aspect we might consider it closer to the art world? Or is it a purpose in which you're trying to transmit an idea or give something out to a wider public, in which way we may consider it closer to design? Is that, if you can explain a little bit about your thought process?
Yes, the Fontaine project is really about the decorative function, actually. When you are a design student, I mean, when I was a design student 10 years ago in Paris, you really start with what is good design, with the 10 rules of Dieter Rams, and this was really the mindset of, the design is defined by its function. And I really have the feeling it changed a lot. Like now it's even not anymore a question. Like I really like that things get blurry between these boundaries of, like you clearly, even in a fair like here, like you clearly see that the boundaries are not really existing anymore. This question is maybe a bit outdated, but for me, like, to speak about the project I show, it is totally useless in an ergonomical way, let's say. I don't know in English how to say that, but for me, I really see it as an object which is a kind of entertainment for eyes, like surprising, questioning. People are really trying to understand how it works. They look at it. It has, as I was saying, a movement. It's animated. Some of the objects really became product design things, like vase or carpet, even if it was mostly purely decorative. But we do not accept it except some boxes, little boxes that we constructed. And the fountain is not really an object that we saw a lot, except some feng shuis and fountains in restaurants. But for me, it's really a decorative function, which is as important. I mean, we are in a world which is so much constructed. We have so many chairs, so many lights, so many tables. The function for me is not in this kind of design that we show here anymore. I mean, maybe it's more in the numeric field or in the engineering world, but when we create collectible product objects like this, I think the question is much, much more here in our context about materials, about aesthetics, about what it conveys as feelings, as emotion, as you were talking about. I think.
That's good, thank you. And it's interesting you say that you see a decorative function, but calling it that in and of itself is a perhaps something to consider and to chew on, the idea that the decoration itself is a function. But I saw as well in your inspirations you had a picture of Duchamp as well, so maybe the age-old question is continues from there. I'd love to get a curatorial point of view on it, because one of the things as well, I guess, is who decides the function. Is it the designer? Is it the curator? Is it the museum? And to whom does that responsibility lie? Because I know a lot of designers who may produce work with a very clear function in their minds, but then their work may be shown in an art environment and therefore it's lent a different kind of meaning. So maybe you can explain how you view some of these works.
Yeah, thank you. I think for me, in my practice, what I'm interested in is who decides on what is functional. And for me, this can totally be the user. We see people using objects for all different things they're not meant for in the first place. But on the other hand, I also think that the designer has a lot of impact on the functionality of the object he or she produces, and this should not always match. I really like it when designers produce objects with an idea of a function, or with a message, or with something they want to tell, and where users are not perceiving it that way or using it differently. Or I like it to see this blurry part, and we have all our a little bit of power in the objects we see and use and produce in creating that functionality together. And I think it's always very context-based. As you said, if you put something on a pedestal in a museum, it gets a totally different context. And I really think design is truly context-based. There's a very nice example just outside this door. I don't know if you've seen it, but outside on the sidewalk, there is a very nice object actually by Sepp Verboom, who's a young designer. And he made this really, really nice, perfectly designed bin. And it was very shiny on Thursday when we just passed, and now it's being used as a bin. But if it would have been inside these walls, we would have used it totally differently, and people would definitely not put out their cigarettes on top of it. Or I like it to see those boundaries shifting, to see everyone claiming a bit of power over objects. And for me, it's not the question who decides, we all decide. And this is the interesting part. How are things used? What does a designer want to tell? But this might be changed over time. And I think those are the most interesting objects to show, to work with, to show an audience. Sometimes this changes over time as well. This is a real valuable thing in design, yeah.
Thank you. I like the idea of the context being so important in that. Benoit, I'm going to ask you too. Are you somebody who changes that context? Is that part of your modus operandi? Are you taking things from one world and presenting them in another consciously? Or perhaps you can explain a bit about that.
I mean, what she said, you know, the idea of context, the idea of functionality is kind of preposterous today, where the functionality lies in the eyes of the person who looks at it. I think time is a big component when you look at antiquities, when you look at you know, decorative arts all over the time period of humanity. You know, the purpose of the object has changed a lot, where, you know, a seat used to be, you know, a way of assessing power. You know, if you're the king of the kingdom, like, you have to have the best seat. And now it's just an insight into history. When you look at what we call tribal art, or art premier, many of these objects were not, I mean, they were made to have a purely, you know, religious or ritualistic function, and now they're considered as, you know, art objects. So I think playing with the context, playing with, you know, tricking the viewer into looking at something in a different way is definitely something that I like to do with functional art gallery, because function doesn't really matter anymore. And, you know, I always have this idea of rationality. You know, in today's world, is rationality something that matters? And I don't think it does. You know, we've made the best table, we've made the best seat ages ago. So why would we hold design to a standard of rationality that doesn't matter anymore? So I think that's why, you know, what you do, what you're talking about, what Anna does too, the idea of functionality is kind of dated.
Can I just... yeah, maybe just one sentence. Maybe the real question now to ask is, what is the function of the designer more than the object, maybe? Like, I like what you say about the time thing, is like the designer is writing the story of a time. So, yeah.
Thank you. And one thing that interests me as well is how younger designers work now and the freedom that they have, which can come from really practical things. There are a lot of designers who are able to work autonomously because of changes in the way that we work with machinery, the digital world, and that in turn leads to a freedom, and that in turn leads to a certain amount of expression. And I think that's part of this debate too. So, Anna, not surprisingly, this one's for you. Your work is very expressive and filled with message. So do you feel kind of emboldened by the current situation of how designers are able to work? Does that feed into how you work?
Yeah, so I definitely think what is happening now is that we have this freedom, and we also are trying to create everything by ourselves because we're so driven in design by narrative now. It's all about telling stories, and these stories, of course, then many times goes beyond the functionality, changing the functionality from the actual use to the message that is behind. And I think in my work it has been extremely important to tell the narratives and the story of women, even though it's a topic that we talk a lot about. I still think it's quite important, and especially in the field of design. I have been fortunate enough to be able to create these sculptural pieces, and I like the fact to have this freedom because it makes objects that really goes away from how we actually view design. So a chair is not only 4 legs and a rest, you know, it can be, I don't know, 50 legs and something else, but then it also has this story which gives the design and heightens it a bit to a different level. Because as you say, we know functionality and we've been knowing it for so many years. So during the past, I don't know, maybe like 15 years, this has really been progressing into the designer being the narrator of a story, of a contemporary issue, or a contemporary narrative.
Thank you. I'm curious as to what you think the effect of this kind of atmosphere is on industrial design. The idea of narrative and storytelling being quite a critical part of a designer's role now. Does that have any impact on other aspects of design? We're sat in a space that celebrates the kind of design that we're talking about now, but of course this is only one aspect of the bigger design world. So are there any repercussions? What do you think, Annelies?
Yeah, I think so. I think these boundaries between the different design fields are blurring as well. I teach to product design students, and I brought them here on Thursday. And it's very inspiring for them to see how more artistic-oriented designers tell a story of research they did, or a story of something in the society they want to tackle. And they might or might not choose that path. Some of them, they make drills for the rest of their lives, and some of them go on that more research path. And I think many designers, especially those who are graduating nowadays, those fields are not as strict. As for the industry, I really think here in Belgium we have a tradition of very nice design companies who really have a tradition of collaborating with designers that tell stories and that work in their own practice, and we have a tradition of nice objects that come from there. So I really believe that what is happening here is, of course, spreading to the rest of the industry, and yeah, I think it's a good thing.
Thank you. And Arthur, maybe another one for you. This idea that you came from a quite kind of normal design background, let's say, and you, that was your history, your education, but the work that you're producing now lives in a different world. Do you still think that you come at projects though with that background? Is materiality, making processes, does it still inform what you do? And if so, is that enough for us to always call you a designer?
I'm not so sure to understand the question. Sorry, but what I could say is also speaking about these boundaries that are blurring, the everyday life of a designer, I mean in the everyday work of a designer, is also very, has changed a lot, I think. Like, I do like scenography for museum, for theater, even for cinema. I do, I don't know, objects, spaces. Like, I have the feeling that young designers do many more different projects because first, it's hard to live only with producing objects, but then because also we really like to do many different things in different fields, and I think it's really important to think as the designer work now with these multiple aspects.
Do you believe that's a good thing?
I think it's a good thing. Yeah, for me it's really important actually to break this little box. It's funny the way that, I mean, in France people really think in little boxes like that about, for example, art or design. Like I really have often the question of, is your fontaine art or design? I think it's really not the question at all, and I think it's really important for young designers to define the next thing between in this gray zone between boxes.
And Anna, do you feel the same? Is it? Can we be optimistic? Is it a period of positivity for young designers that they have so much freedom and they're able to do all of these different things?
I think it's good that we can kind of that the boundaries are a bit fluid and that we can kind of float around. But personally, I don't want to enter, for example, the sphere of art. But I believe there is a boundary in between art and design that are yet to be fully defined. Or it's also the question if we should define it, because I feel like also we've been trying to do this for many years to see like what is actually the middle ground, and it's super hard to answer that question. Because you also see people in the field of art transgressing into the field of design. So, for me, it's hard to find the middle ground. But I like the fact that it's fluid and we can go into use our ability as designers. It would also make sense if we're storytellers to go into scenography and create spaces and total environments and not just focus on one or two objects themselves. So the freedom and the fluidity, I think it's great for young designers. Also, as everyone is a designer today, everyone can call themselves a designer. So we needed to also go in and create a different field for ourselves with our education, because suddenly we found ourselves lost in a time where everyone could do chairs, table, and whatever.
Thank you. So if everything is fluid, if we exist in this grey area and we're all positive about it, maybe we can break down, Benoit, maybe you can break down what are the values of these objects if people aren't looking for a functional object, if they are indifferent to functionality. There must still be qualities that these works need, whether they are about messaging or whether they're decorative, whether it's material. What do the people that you sell to and you exhibit to, what are they looking for in these works?
That's a tricky one. I think, like just like we said, functionality is kind of outdated. I think, putting value or like having a goal set into an object is in the same way. I think we live in a very exciting time with the visual arts, design, whatever you want to call it, where there's a research, there's an exploration, there's this idea of pushing the boundaries that just in itself, but enough. I think, when you see an object that makes you think, that makes you see something different, a concept that's interesting, new material using, discarded plastic, or there's an idea there, and there's a value into having just this idea of going further. And I think it's really cool to be able to evolve in a space where research, where exploration is just kind of the end goal, and you don't have to get from point A to B. You can just stay and end up on Z, and it's the purpose is the trip, I guess. So as far as what my clients go and the people that I live with, they kind of buy into this idea of exploration. They kind of buy into the wonder, which, where this field of design connects with art, where, what's the functionality of art? Is there one? Do we need to have one? No, you get a piece of the wonder, I guess.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I think objects are little pieces of meaning in society, and you can collect them, you can see them, you can encounter them, and I think that's why in my art center we also we don't make that distinction between art or design. It doesn't matter. It's just about the part of the meaning that you want to convey. So these boundaries are quite blurry, and you see that with designers as well. We will have an exhibition of Tuur van Balen and Revital Cohen, who were quite critical designers, but they don't want to be branded as designers anymore. They want to be branded as artists, although their work is quite similar. So you see that these boundaries they're artificial because it's about meaning.
Why is that label important to them then to change?
I don't know. But for me, it proves that those boundaries are quite fluid, and yeah.
I kind of know. I think there's such a negative connotation with the word designer and the label designer that it's very diminutive, and I think this conversation is proof of that. Coming to the realization that design is not one, but it's multiple, and that. Like if you're doing design, you're just not, making wooden chairs. I mean, which we need as well, of course, but there's something more. And I think for some designers, they have this, negative connotation with the labeling of like, oh, you're a designer. So what you do doesn't have any other value than the value of function that I, the viewer, look at it. Like your chair is really bad. But it's not about that, and I think that's why some designers are labeling themselves as artists, because they are looking to just expand the field of what they do.
Because actually, I had a discussion with a teacher not so long ago, and we had this discussion where he asked why I didn't want to be called an artist, because I think it's very important to also reclaim back the status of being a designer, because design is fairly important to our everyday life and to how we live. So I also think it's very important that sometimes to just fight, even though it can be very sculptural what is being made, or it's research driven if you're a critical designer, to keep the label of design, to be able to also push and say it's not art, it can still be design. It's just a little.
And it's funny also to see how the appearance of the object really talks about the mindset of what is design, because design has always been searching its own definition, and in the 50s, for example, when you have the streamline movement, it's really talking about functionality, even if it was purely useless. You don't need a fer à repasser, I don't know the name in English, iron thing to build the shape of a plane. But now I also have the feeling we're in a post-modernist where it's the contest of who will have the less functional visibility in the object. Some of the objects are really searching to be to hide the functionality between a shape also. And it's funny to see this huge contrast between two different times of design also.
I have something to say about it. It's interesting because the Japanese have an exercise they called Shindogu, which is the art of useless things. And it's this mental exercise to create useless objects that have a function, but the function is so kind of ridiculous and stupid that the object in itself is useless. So I think it's interesting also with what you were saying that this idea that function brings interest is not necessarily correlated.
Thank you. One of the things I thought when you were talking then, I guess the idea of a designer being negative or lesser in any way than an artist, I would be uncomfortable with. I think one of the things about functionality, kind of a word that we haven't said during the discussion, is responsibility as well. And I think all designers, many that I know anyway, have kind of an inherent a feeling of responsibility, because that is part of what functionality is aiming for. But is there anything anybody wants to say anymore? Are there any questions I've not asked? No? Maybe we should ask, does anybody else have a question or a query? No? Yes.
You bring up Shindoju, and I think that's quite an entertaining example. Shindoju, the Japanese movement he spoke of, such an interesting example because they're so ridiculous, absolutely, and they're kind of the icon of like a radical decision, you know, and I feel like what we're seeing in younger designs is this decision to try and be radical and ridiculous. And in some ways, I don't think it's negative, but does that undermine the history? Or does it undermine our history of cultivating works that are so relevant? Maybe I'm opposing relevant to ridiculous. I wonder what you think about that contrast. I'm not convinced, but...
Okay, relevant or ridiculous?
Yeah, it's maybe irrelevant, but it's mostly funny actually. There is a real ironic also way in Shaidogo. It's an exercise of fun in a way, no? And yeah, and for me, the humoristic part of the function is super important also because it's a part of the narrative thing. So it's connected to a question of function.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting with that is, you know, the radicalness of it and the idea of when you push anything to the extreme, you get something that's ridiculous or that's funny. Because when you go so deep into a very specific kind of thing, it ends up becoming kind of like the opposite of that. And when we can go back from that to the idea of responsibility, a lot of designers do have this responsibility on their shoulder of like, oh, like I need to solve this or I need to change the world because if I don't do it, who's going to do it? And I mean, that's great. We need people to save the world. We need people to, you know, discover new things. We need people to do that. But saying that all designers needs to have that responsibility is very unfair.
Sure. Yeah. No. I mean, no. I don't. We are different types of designers all the way. Like, luckily, we have like a broad fan of designers. So I think for some, it's a responsibility, and some wants to invent the life straw, you know, and we can really take that and do something with it. Whereas I also think it's also a responsibility to just communicate a message, which is great. So there's different levels of responsibility, and there's different ways of also what we find to be important to tell stories about or to solve. I think more the designers that are today does not, in the conceptual department, doesn't necessarily solve a problem, but rather questions an issue and kind of makes hopefully people also reflect upon things that are quite important that we don't necessarily pay attention to.
Great, thank you. Any more questions from our lovely audience? No? Okay, I guess that's it, if everybody's done. But thank you so much. Thank you, panel. And that's it. Thank you.